right, so people can see us now. Hopefully, if they're watching. But hello, everyone. Happy Friday. Good to see you guys. We are, about 2 minutes into this thing, so we'll wait a little bit more. Wait for people to join in and stuff.
Friday night crypto.
Yeah, it's funny because I can't remember why I scheduled this podcast on a Friday. Way back in the day, like mid 2017 maybe. I started or late 2017, I don't know. Started doing the Dash podcast, and on like the Dash News channel, which doesn't really get updated anymore. And it was about at this time, and then it created this sort of culture of the show, and then the after party is like a Jitsi hangout where people just talk shit and it's still the after party's still going strong. And then after I started my own channel, I did this show at the usual time. And then I bumped the Dash podcast up an hour to 4 p.m. Eastern or 8 p.m. UTC usually. And then the after party after that, and then Friday is like, I've gotten so much flack for like, you're never available on Friday. And I'm just like, it's because I'm doing the Lord's work here, okay?
Making it happen. Yeah, exactly. Who are these whiners? Like, there's all weekend they can hang out.
I mean, I live with one of them, so I better not make her mad. But it's funny. I've done a few times where I've been like on the after party driving somewhere, and then like on the after party back from like doing whatever, and then just hang out somewhere, and then typing. People are like, "Are you typing and driving?" I'm like, "No." So
it's just solid hustle, mate. That's just just making it happen. You can't listen to the haters.
So one thing I've noticed about, and sorry for everyone who's just listening to us mumble right now, but one thing I've noticed, people are doing Twitter Spaces a lot, and I put out a little call of like, who wants to have me on their podcast, and everyone's like, Twitter Space. So I was like on all these freaking Twitter Spaces, and I might start doing it. Like, let me know what you guys think if I should start doing a Twitter Space after party for some of these podcasts, and then do like, I mean, there will always be the exclusive one, right? There's always going to be the after party that that you need private invite that's not broadcast. But anyway, see if you like the Twitter Space idea. I see Omar says hi all. And so, hi, Omar.
Omar's a regular. He does my
oh, nice.
And
so he's your
just a chill dude.
He's your dude then, huh?
Big fan of crypto and everything.
Yeah, let me see. I wonder where all my peeps are today. The paying customers. Yeah, they're doing whatever. All right, so we do have like 6 watching on YouTube, which for this shit little show is pretty good this early on. So yeah, might as well roll the intro and get right into it. Here we go. 3, 2, 1, boom. So, hey everyone. Happy Friday officially. This is the Digital Cash Rundown, your favorite crypto news and shit-talking show out there. Hopefully, if not, then you need to slap yourselves and reevaluate your life. I'm joined by the one and only Jeremy. I don't think he's the only man called Jeremy in the world. In fact, I know another Jeremy who runs Library, but he's the only guy that I know who only wants to be called Jeremy. In the thumbnail, I called you Jeremy BCH because that's all
so
right.
Good, man.
Yeah. Have you been, dude? It's been. I don't know if you remember, the last show you were on was before I got my internet fixed and before I got this computer, and it was I don't know. I didn't expect you to come back on, is all I'm saying.
No, man. Because I remember that because I was doing it with the screen blacked out, and half the time I wasn't sure if you were even hearing what I was saying, but then the actual VOD came out fine. So I just powered through it, and it all worked. That's the way you want to be. Just hope for the best, and just the show must go on, man. I'm on board with that.
Absolutely. And I could have waited. It's funny, one of those, even though I think I've got a pretty nice setup now, I was chatting with, what's his name? Jiggy Tom of Library, or Odyssey, I guess is where he's working now. And I said, like, hey, I found a way to multi-stream so I could do to Odyssey too. is there like value in me creating a video showing other people how to do this thing? Because it was a little bit of a process. He's like, no, most of these people are like professional streamers and they just got like paid restream stuff and everything. I'm just like, yeah, here I am being Mr. Ghetto, you know, doing the open source, free open source everything, being the cheap bastard. I'm not a professional streamer, but whatever. It is what it is.
Trenches, man. Work your way up.
Yeah.
That's what we're all trying to do. Play in the big leagues.
Of course.
Featured Twitch streamers or whatever.
Well, I would like to draw everyone's attention to, I got the NFT super chat going. So this is obviously from last time's show, but if you are in my Discord because you have the NFT, which you get one of two ways, you either buy it or you do proof of work. You actually come on this show and then I give you one. Like Jeremy got the first one. He helped me get this set up. You can participate in this live super chat thing there. If not, you can go to cointr.ee/thedesertlinks. That's cointr.ee/thedesertlinks and throw a little donation with the message, and then I'll pop out the little super chat there. And I'll work on other options and stuff too. But those are the ropes. That's what we're doing. What do you think? You ready to dive into these stories? Because this is a crazy time to be alive. All right, here we go. So, oops, that was the one for the last slide. But that's fine. We'll start off with a little teaser of the Bitcoin Cash thing in St. Kitts, but we'll come back to that. So first off, what's his name? SBF, Sam Bankman-Fried, which I should point out is pretty. Isn't it hilarious that this dude's name is Bankman?
Bankman.
He's the Bankman. It's like the evil crypto supervillain. He came out with basically a recommendation set for regulations for the crypto industry, sort of. And basically, I mean, you read through this whole thing, right?
Yeah.
It's
top to bottom.
It's like I got through 80% of it. Like I covered the whole thing, but I glossed over some words because there's just so many words in there. But basically, a lot of it is in line with what's going on now, but basically just says we should have sanctions and block lists and things like that. Like we should basically have block lists that you have to go through in order to transact, I guess. And then he mentioned something about with respect to DeFi. These are my key takeaways. You can mention some of your own, but with respect to DeFi, he said that code is free speech. Everyone should be able to do it. You know, should be any restrictions. However, if you run a DeFi interface or kind of host stuff on your AWS services or whatever, you could potentially have to register as a financial services provider in the U.S. I'm sure most of this is about the U.S. that he's talking about. And then finally, he mentioned about like FTX is not going to list anything that he considers to be a security, right? Which is a completely arbitrary, I guess, U.S. narrative for the most part. And basically just says that like the SEC should be much more clear about what's a security or not and all that kind of stuff. But basically he just says like, well, let's not make it let's make it like mostly permissionless, but still a bunch of KYC and bullshit and stuff like that. I don't know. I'm not being very fair to him, but I don't care to. So, what's your take on his recommendations, etc.?
Yeah, well, I thought basically what it comes down to is, I mean, to be charitable to him, he is running FTX. He's running a huge exchange. He probably has to deal with all these regulators and blah 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 like all the time. But on the other hand, to not be charitable or to be realistic, I think, is basically just trying to backdoor in a lot of controls and regulation and all this stuff, which probably actually doesn't hurt him as FTX. It probably benefits him because it cuts out smaller competitors that don't have the squillions of dollars that he has to run all of this stuff. It's just the oldest trick in the book to get regulatory capture is to be the big player with the money and be the one setting the agenda and having a lot of burdens that a small competitor can't play with. So there's sort of stuff in there where it's like, I hate it when people are always trying to be reasonable in quotation marks, but then once you look into it, by trying to be reasonable, it's just their way of trying to sort of sugar over the fact that it's like a poison pill type of thing. And that's just the feeling I get from this. It's like, no, crypto should be mostly permissionless, but we got to definitely have ban lists and block lists, guys. Like, we can't not have those. That's too unreasonable. And then Hossein says Jeremy's voice is low. Maybe I'll see if I can speak a bit louder.
How's that for you guys? I upped the volume a little bit.
Okay.
It's almost... Hossein, please comment again. Anyway, keep ranting so he has data to work with.
Yeah. So I just thought they were just trying to slip that in, and then, we need to have regulated like web front ends for DeFi stuff. That's just so ridiculous. If you add that, how are people going to use any of this stuff? It's basically just going to be back to being a bank, because if you need to just code up a React front end, you need to get a service license and everything. That's just not going to... Like, where are we going to get the next sushi swap from? It's not going to happen, because that was just a few people who just coded it up.
Yeah.
Like, it's ridiculous.
It is indeed. And it's kind of funny. You're talking about hating people being reasonable. That just reminded me of some fellow I used to know in the crypto space who was like a Bitcoin Cash type person, and he started something that was like a reasonable discussion channel. Let's just be reasonable. And he ended up, first off, becoming a hardcore BS viewer, which, lamentable. And then also he became like a QAnon guy, and then was like super bought into it, and then he just he vanished. So yeah, his trip to being reasonable. People who say they're reasonable, they're very sus. So as far as like this whole thing, let me give my positive take. Right, I do my Steel Manning. I think he's trying to be reasonable here, actually reasonable. He's also trying to engage with the regulators, because the crypto universe has said, no, we don't rent regulations. And the regulators are like, well, that's just not going to happen. And so he's trying to be like, well, I'm the guy who actually you can listen to, because I say, yeah, sure, regulate me, daddy, just a little bit. But like by saying it's just a little bit, he's hoping to just that's where it stops. Like, we can all agree on that. And I do think that there's some wisdom to the notion that we're in a negotiation phase where we want no regulation. I mean, I do. And then they want all the regulation. At some point, you're going to wiggle it down to the center where it's just like, okay, well, we have a lot more freedom than we used to in the old financial system. So that's, I think, what he's trying to do. The DeFi thing was a little weird about regulate these interfaces in the US, meaning he knows DeFi cannot compete if it does that. He knows that he's going to have a hegemony in the US markets if ThorSwap or SushiSwap or Uniswap or any of these things have to register and KYC there. They're just not going to do it. They're not set up for it. He's already got first mover advantage. He can just crush DeFi. DeFi's a direct threat to his business model, and so he wants to regulate that. Other than that, I don't think it's malicious, but I do think that's malicious. But on the other hand, the problem is I think he's negotiating too soon. I don't think that we're at the point where we get to just call it in the middle like he's saying it. I think that we're at the point where he says that, and then the government says, great idea, but we want these things too. And then all of a sudden the Overton window, he needs to be moving the Overton window to the absolute opposite end and just fight it out. And then the center kind of rests somewhere reasonable in an actual sense, not the way this guy's trying to get. Oh, I don't know if you think of that.
Well, I think that like you said, he's trying to sort of protect his interests. And the weird thing was that if you read the article, he makes a big sort of point about he's not trying to actually create or regulations or anything like that. What he's trying to do is create industry standards or start a discussion about crypto norms or something like that, which is, again, it's just missing the point. It's just who do you think you're going to negotiate with? Either you can go to Coinbase and Binance and try and get all of them on board with your game plan, in which case all of the smaller fish can just say, fuck you guys and your big corporate whatever, we're just going to do things our way. It's not like he can reasonably get a quorum or any amount. It's crypto, it's decentralized, it's the whole point. It's not like tennis or something where, okay, there's a central body who is in charge and they set the standards of industry conduct or whatever, which are maybe not laws or politically enforced, but they are kind of industry norms. If he wants to create some industry norms, he's free to lead by example with whatever norms he wants to set at FTX, and maybe he's even free to lobby other companies that he thinks are influential to try and follow him. But that's a completely separate process to what he's trying to do, which is, hey, why doesn't everybody in crypto just agree with me? Which is like never gonna happen. It's crypto, mate. People are not going to agree, but everyone can agree that. Well, apparently we can't. Yeah, exactly. Everyone can agree that no one's going to agree, and also everyone can agree that, like, that's why there's no censorship is the baseline. Because as soon as you add some censorship, it becomes subjective. It's a dividing line type of thing. But no censorship is no censorship. That's very clear.
Yeah,
So.
of course. Well, so Erik Voorhees had a response to SBF and Principled, all this kind of stuff, and I just love this like shining technological city kind of thing that he's got going on here. It's very biased, but it's in a good way. He says, above image by AI, which prompt a free city in the future, prosperous classical art style renaissance. So he made it. I just think it's funny. Voorhees made like an AI generated like awesome picture, and he tells you exactly what it was, and it's like that's the way to kick off this thing. But basically, through all this stuff, and I won't. You can read this thing, by the way, yourself. Just go to Erik Voorhees' Twitter. He's good on Twitter and stuff. But basically, his point of view is very similar. But then at the same time, he's just saying, first off, the SEC won't tell you how to obey with their securities laws. They say it's clear. Here's the Howey test as it goes. But like they won't even say what are the top 20 cryptocurrencies and how does that fit the test? Like they want to be able to make shit up as they go along because they're kind of still doing that. And obviously the OFAC thing is he even pointed at a very big thing where SBF is like, it's the law anyway, follow it. But it's like the OFAC list prevents you from transacting with people in sanctioned countries such as Iran, such as Russia, such as things like that. And it's kind of funny because the last Dash podcast I did, which I believe was last week, if I remember correctly, there was a giant chunk of the questions there were from the Russian Dash community. And it's funny, I just don't even think twice about that. They're just like a big chunk of people that are just like all into this stuff and I'm interacting with, some I've worked with, et cetera, et cetera. And it's just like, but you can't transact. Okay. Like what a nonsense world that is. So basically Voorhees put together a lot of like points of the laws are kind of bullshit in a lot of ways. And we shouldn't be like accepting of the bad ones. Like, of course you can't steal. Of course you got to pay your taxes. Of course this kind of stuff, but we can't just bend over for those terrible laws that the government just like, I think this is a good idea. And they're not going to just say, you know what, after all these years of screwing everyone over, we realize that this was too far. We're going to give away a little of our power. It never happens. You have to fight for every inch of it. And there's a lot of like inches to fight for, so to speak. Otherwise, you're going to get inches in the behind, if you know what I'm saying. So, that's kind of how that works.
Yeah, exactly. And I think one of the things I was surprised about was Erik actually agreed with him about the block list. He basically said, we should have block lists, and that I was working on some with Shapeshift or whatever, but just not at the protocol level, which I thought was pretty weird because while he's right and it's sort of consistent that, okay, if FTX wants to have a government block list thing that they cook up with the government and that they agree themselves to comply with, and they're just not going to accept deposits from those addresses, then, I mean, obviously they're free to do that and they can do that. But the whole point is it's sort of it's a compounding effect. So the reason that they would have a tough time doing that is because if no other exchange enforces that, then they're just shooting themselves in the foot. So to make it effective for them, or part of their grand vision or whatever, they sort of need to buy in more and more of the ecosystem. And if it goes past 50% or whatever of the main places you can trade or send around coins or whatever, then that's when it turns into a huge grief. Like it rapidly then snowballs to everything is just censored and wrecked. So I don't know why Erik was saying, he not only saying you can do that, but you should do that, where I think crypto companies should be trying to, you want defense in depth. You want to say 100% no censorship at the protocol level, because that's just screwed. And then at the corporate level, we need to be not encouraging any kind of censorship or anything, because that's like chipping away at the first layer of the armor. Why would you do that? And yeah, it just made no sense to me that he was on board with the whole censorship, but just not at the protocol level. Like you don't ever want to fight like that, where you just not this one critical lever though.
It's kind of fun. I mean, I honestly think that he's talking more about dealing with known thefts and hacks and stuff, to where you want to say, or to basically, if you do know as a crypto community there's a bad actor doing bad things, then this is how you cannot in good conscience really do business with them. That's on the individual's choice or the individual company's choice. But basically, like if there's someone out there, like if someone stole a whole lot of money from, some grandmother or whatever, and we figured out who that is, or maybe not who that is, but we followed the money, and then the stolen money, someone wants to go buy one of my NFTs to like launder it or whatever. If I knew that, I would refuse commerce with that person. I'd be like, no, I'm not taking stolen money to help you do this kind of stuff. I would personally do something like that. Now, I think that's what he's talking about, is if there's known criminality and like actual bad stuff going on, we should figure out a way to locate that. Although it's kind of weird the way Erik is talking about addresses and stuff. Same thing with like the government and stuff, because that's crypto boomerism, to be honest. Like, it's kind of weird the way the world has gone, because when I started using Bitcoin back in 2013, I had one address, and then at some point HD wallets came around and confused the shit out of me. I'm just like, why can't I just use my old address that I always liked? And like I didn't get it, and then it took a while. Okay, so now you have multiple addresses, a new one for everything in most cryptocurrencies, and UTXO coins at least. Then the Ethereum and DeFi and all that world came back and brought back all the rage of just one address anymore. And so, but people are still asking like, oh, this address is a bad address. It's like, you know how disposable those things are? And then, commonplace coin joins are on all those networks. I mean, you got Bitcoin has 1 million implementations. Bitcoin Cash has a bunch. Dash has had it baked in since 2014. Then you got Decred even has it. And like just everyone's coin joining. Litecoin has this weird Mimblewimble weirdness going on. Then you got all the encrypted stuff. You got like Monero with the whole ring signature stuff. So like a Monero address sanctioning a Monero address doesn't care. What, like, is there a shielded Zcash address that you're like, oh, this address, you can't get funds from that? It's like, well, how the hell do you know? Like you just don't know. And at some point, I think that they will have to, I guess, either say from known thieves or something like that, or like digital identities, or they'll have to just say known compromised funds or something, where it'll be 1 million different addresses somewhere, but they'll track the funds through the blockchain, find out, be like, I think that that's the stolen stuff, and then just say, hey, you did it one of those. That's no good. But I mean, it's a very complicated problem to solve on a free market level. The thing is, you got to solve it on the free market level, and that's the big thing. I don't think Erik is calling for any kind of government intervention in any way. I think the Bankman is not only calling. Now he's acquiescing to a lot of government intervention, and he's also kind of calling for some new intervention.
Well, it just cuts to fungibility at a certain point. That's why I think it's a bit weird that Erik's saying like, yeah, we should be, like you're saying about this money was stolen by whatever. I mean, if you're directly adjacent to it, then maybe if you're getting the money that the grandma was, it was stolen from grandma by bad guy, and then bad guy wants to buy a yacht from you with it, well, maybe you care about that. But at a certain point, it's just gone into circulation, where I'm sure we've all used cash that has been screwed around with or been involved in some quote unquote, illegal or dodgy stuff at some point, right? And so that's the money has to be fungible. So we shouldn't be doing anything to assist in making it less fungible. And hopefully it won't, it won't ever be impacted in terms of fungibility. Again, it comes back to how much of the world is enforcing it. Like, if money just can't be spent at registered US merchants under some scheme, then firstly, there has to be a lot of effort to get all those merchants on board. But even if it is, if you can spend, like, the US is only a fraction of the world, right? So then it will just end up getting spent and moved around somewhere else until it's sufficiently washed up. Like, the value flows wherever it's going to flow, no matter what. And we certainly don't want to make that worse on crypto based on some arbitrary regulations, basically.
Yeah, I think that also a lot of this conversation is including what Erik is saying. And I don't, unlike SBF, I don't fault Erik for this. I think but it's a very present day conversation. It's just like saying, like, oh, what are we going to do about, like, internal combustion engines and stuff? Like, okay, but what about 200 years from now? Is there going to be a single one of those left? Maybe, by the way. I don't know. But maybe not. But it's a very present day conversation about, how will we defend our government pensions? And it's like, well, what about 50 years from now when there's no government pensions anymore? The government's collapsed in a big fireball. That discussion is no longer relevant at that point. It's kind of like the I don't know if YouTube's still censoring the stuff, but like the Rona vaccination debate, that was there's a much greater human rights debate around that, but that's a very 2020 to 2021 debate. It's just so irrelevant today, much less 20 years from now. So I think that crypto, first off, there's a lot of past and future in crypto. The past part people forget about is cash/coins, right? Gold coins, and then paper representations of that, or then it turned into fiat and everything went downhill from there. But still, all that was like the way people transacted for the vast majority of, I guess, civilization. And what happened if you stole something? What happened if you were a bad person? What happened to all this other stuff? I mean, there was some ways of tracking bills and coins and stuff like that, but for the most part, it's just out of your hands. It's just fungible. It's circulating. It's like, who cares? Mostly the crime part, because we're talking about, with regulation, we're talking about crime. Or if we're not talking about crime, we should shut the hell up, right? Don't regulate anything that's not criminal. And so with all this kind of crime stuff, people always found thieves. They always found a way to bring back the money to the, not always, but there was always ways of doing that. Finding thieves, blocking bad actors from doing things, et cetera, et cetera. It all falls on the individual. And then when you had technology, you had these like systems, these intricate transfer systems that then became easy to capture, and they got captured. And then you could say, hey, then you could have a conversation about, well, I don't know, you allow this, an ID for that, and all this nonsense. Now we're at this point where we're to the digital cash era, where anyone can send anything to anyone, anywhere in the world. You can't stop it. And then people are still trying to think about this, like banks and accounts and stuff like that. It's like, at some point, I honestly think, and I unfortunately don't think this is going to be the first regulatory iteration that has group consensus. But I think we're going to have to put up with some bullshit for a few years, maybe even our lifetimes. I don't know. But eventually it's trending to the spot where the activity, the infrastructure, all that is just like an act of God. It just is out there. People use it. They don't. And the regulation, the criminalization, the enforcement, the tax collection, all that is going to fall on the individual. Like, you, how much money did you make? Not where, let me see your account stuff. Okay, how much money you make at your job? How much money you make here? This is how much you owe, pay it. and you go to jail if you don't. Which again, I hate this stuff. I don't agree with it. I don't think we as a society need that, but at least in like the medium term, that'll probably be the reality. But then it's like on you. It's not like, well, let me give a KYC all your addresses and all this other, like, no, you're going to do economic activity however you do it, which are your NFTs, or just as long as it's just an enforcement on that. Or like, are you a thief? Do we find evidence you're probably a thief? We track your IP address or whatever, and, you know, do we honeypot you and like, you know, like buy hookers with stolencoins.com or whatever, and you were dumb enough to buy, and then we got you? Like, that's kind of where it will settle. And so the actual regulation part of things, I think, needs to just only focus on that part. Otherwise, you know, it's kind of like the file sharing thing, right? Anyone can share a file. They try to criminalize, they try to make people criminals for just sharing files. Eventually they had to just acquiesce to this is the way the world works, and be like, okay, well, if you're selling someone else's work, especially at scale, we're going to come after you for that. But just pay the artist, pay the royalties, good on Spotify, I don't care. But like, as far as the sharing, it's just completely open. It's probably the way crypto is going to end up. Or I hope. I don't know if you think the same.
Yeah, I do think the same. I think people just ultimately, it's going to start. It just cuts away what's feasible. Like, people who are very big on regulations and so on and so forth, like, I just feel like a lot of the time they need more life experience. Like, there's shit going on all day, everywhere, all the time that falls outside the exact confines of, you know, certain regulations, right? And it's just, why are the fucking FBI crack squad not like rushing in on everybody who buys 10 you know, bucks of weed? Well, because there's only so many resources, and so they get prioritized onto the stuff that is at the top of the queue, right? Massive crime, or like, you know, really violent things where people are dead and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
And they're going to be the exact same scenario here. Just, it already is. People are just transacting around in crypto and doing whatever they're doing. And then where does their attention and energy get focused? It gets focused onto, okay, the Mt. Gox coins and this massive hack for $800 billion or whatever it is, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that's already how it is, and it's increasingly going to become that way as more and more people are transacting in crypto, because once you yourself are transacting in crypto, you're not like, oh, this is some scary thing that we got to crack down, and you just, okay, it's just a technology, I got it, I use it, okay, fine, on we go, right?
In other words, stop being a boomer about the whole thing. And welcome to law doesn't really work. Which, speaking of which, segue right in.
Nailed it.
Hodlonaut wins Norwegian lawsuit against self-proclaimed Satoshi, Craig Wright. In her ruling, Judge Helen Engebrigtsen, hope that was right, wrote that Grenath had sufficient factual grounds to claim that Wright had lied and cheated in his attempt to prove that he is Satoshi Nakamoto. So basically, well, why don't you start with this one for once? I'm still.
Well, I guess for the listeners, the listeners who don't know, so you have Craig Wright, who's the main front man, I guess you could say, that's what they called him in the lawsuit, of Bitcoin SV. And in 2015, he said, "I'm Satoshi, and I'm never going to go on another interview again." And he then spent the next 7 or 8 years creating as much publicity around himself as he could, constantly trying to claim that he was Satoshi, and yet every time he needs some proof of it, it basically just turns out to be lies and fake and a fraud. And he got firstly kicked out of Bitcoin BTC as part of the block size war, but he wasn't actually a main protagonist in any of that. He just kind of came along for the ride, and then he later got kicked out of Bitcoin Cash, which is why he is with his own chain, Bitcoin SV. And while technically it is just its own cryptocurrency that can, in theory, stand on its own, in practice, the vast majority of people that believe in it also believe in Craig's claim that he is Satoshi, because it's pretty hard to exist in that ecosystem without it. And so he's been in a series of trials. He's also incredibly litigious for somebody who claims to be the anti-government OPSEC expert Satoshi. He spends his whole time trying to sue people in the courts, claiming that the courts are going to vindicate him and prove that he is Satoshi. And yet every time his evidence falls apart, once push comes to shove, and he loses his case. He's lost a case to Roger Ver. He technically won a case against Peter McCormack, but the judge said you submitted a bunch of false evidence. So even though I'm giving you the technical win, like it's only £1 of damages and you can't sue again. Tough shit. And now he lost this one against a Hodlonaut, who was this anonymous Twitter user who called him a fraud on Twitter a bunch of times and pissed him off enough that it came down to court cases, and he's lost for lying again.
Yeah, it's one of those really sad things that I feel a lot of sadness for the people involved in BSV. There's a couple of like absolute pieces of work that just, like Craig, who kind of deserve everything that's coming for them. Honestly though, like my opinion on Craig himself, or Creg, by the way, is the way you spell it. That's the proper spelling. I think there's strong evidence to suggest he was involved with Bitcoin at an extremely early age. I don't think he was Satoshi. Like, there's always a small possibility, but just based on the way he's acting and the things he said and everything he believes in, which I get people change, but I don't think he was the guy who's the master. Is probably Hal Finney, if one's honest, but he could have been involved. But everything since his comeback speaks of scamming, right? And it's like the most like self-congratulatory, like weakest little like self-pat of like, oh, standing up to say he's a scammer. Oh, dude, of course he is. Like, I get no credit for saying that, right? But there's a series of things he's done where, first off, I am the one true prophet and Messiah, created a cult of personality around the protocol, where the only reason my BSV is superior is because it is super, super original. And the only reason it is because he says so and he's the creator, supposedly. And that's kind of created this sort of cult of personality thing. I know a lot of really bright and brilliant people who have jumped on board and started building on BSV because they bought into the truth of the, like, Bitcoin could have done so many things if it wasn't, like, the scaling wasn't censored. And then I guess just they kind of bought into more things and just kind of came along for the ride. Just today I did a thread about how you could deal with spam on Twitter and stuff like that. And I pointed out Twetch, which is a BSV project. I don't know if it's still BSV. I know that CoinYeezy, shout out CoinYeezy, has been doing a lot of talk about doing stuff with Solana or other things like that. But there's a lot of people that have been pretty cool about it, done cool things. But then it's just like the leadership, the core devs, because they don't do anything. Isn't it great that as a scam, by the way, to build something that literally the entire value proposition is, this is literally a copy of this other thing, but it's the original copy, so you don't have to do any work. And its entire value proposition is not doing any work on it, so you don't have to do shit. So they kind of build that. The entire BSV leadership has spent nothing but time just basically talking shit and suing people. Like, no innovations. Patenting, too. That's kind of a combination of talking shit and suing people, I guess, right? The patents, and then suing people, and that's it. And then there's all these builders who are all, like, building on it. But then they're all, like, so disenfranchised now. I've seen so many people, like, BSV people saying, like, I still like BSV, but this Craig dude is a proper wanker. And I'm like, yeah, but eventually you're going to be disabused of that BSV part still as well. Like, that part's coming. Like, there's only so long this guy who's like first off, I don't know how he gets his money. I don't know. I haven't looked into his source of income other than these patenting stuff and getting a bunch of dupes to like pay him royalties, I guess, to use, or pay him licensing fees to do stuff. But also his whole thing of he's trying to prove in court that he's Satoshi to try to coerce legally minors into basically gifting him Satoshi's hoard, which he doesn't actually have access to. That seems to be his end game, is to just gift himself a whole bunch of money and just like take it other than just, I don't know if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, well, the thing is, they've got, like many things in BSV, it's contradictions all the way down. So their narrative, like you're saying, is, no, we got to lock the protocol in stone. It was all perfect. It was all good. And then recently they've come out with a tool to try and reassign UTXOs and freeze coins that were legally tainted or what. It's funny because it ties into the previous thing, but they've come out with a tool to do that. So they want to add coin censoring to their protocol, but on the other hand, the original protocol was perfect and you could never change it. So I don't know how to square that circle, but they do somehow in their mind.
It's very strange because a lot of the way you the cult thing is always like, we have something that no one else has. And because if there's a religious text like the Bitcoin white paper and you must follow that, it's open to whoever's interpretation. But if it's like, no, we got the special interpretation, then you still have your cult power. And I've seen that with it's because it's clear from, and I try to have a very open mind, by the way, because I know smart people in BSV. I'm trying to have a very open mind about this. It's clear from the design of Bitcoin that it was created to be censorship resistant and decentralized. No central authority and resistant to central parties censoring transactions and things like that. And the entire BSV story arc comes from, well, it wasn't properly done. We need to original protocol, super scale, and then it starts to go to, well, but law, because I need to use law and stuff like that. And then all the way back around to now we need to censor stolen coins and all this kind of stuff. And it goes back to literally the opposite of what it started as. And each step along this path back over there has shaken loose a bunch of supporters. And there's just a lot of people that are like, well, what the hell is the point of this? And a lot of people are just saying, well, yeah, if you can, we should be able to reverse transactions if they, or have miners with a court of law kind of reassign coins and stuff like that. We should be able to do this in case of theft and fraud and stuff like that. I'm like, yeah, but this is the old financial system. Bitcoin's useless. Visa can already do enough transactions. You don't need to do any of this stuff if it can already be done that way. And then it's just it kind of has that record scratch moment. And I think we're in the death throes of the movement. That's the thing is, if we're being perfectly honest, a lot of really great crypto projects are, in, I guess, press and market capitalization and possibly even users and daily activity at all-time lows, really, really low. But then you have things like Bitcoin Cash, the conference, we'll hit on the conference a little bit, but there's stuff going on still. There's still people using it. There's I guess it's unkillable to I can't predict the future, but there's a certain unkillable quality to it because there's just a certain baseline of people using it, and it will, even if it's just 880th place, but then there's a few dozen people who love it, they're going to keep using it forever, and it'll keep existing, right? But BSV is starting to get that point where there's that miner that 80% miner who's filtering transactions, not including any transactions that are super cheap. And basically, look how much we can scale, spam transactions. All that was the entire selling point of BSV. And now he's destroying it with actual economic reasoning. And then the Bitcoin Association put out what I called the citizen's arrest of the miner, just saying, you were not allowed, according to the white paper, you're in deep trouble, mister. Just I think we're hitting the end of BSV. I don't know about right now, but next year or two, I think it's going to be over with. What do you think?
Well, yeah, I think it's interesting you say that because I think I've had a similar thought and have similar impression or chats going on with different people. It's very hard for crypto to totally die. It will probably still exist in some form, but to the extent they've already been so toxic and everything, they've got themselves delisted from almost all the major exchanges, and there was a bunch more after this miners incident. The miners came in and started wrecking them, which led to the cognitive dissonance has just got to such a level that it's even penetrating in the depths of whoever is involved there, because the Craig was talking shit about the miner and saying you can't do this and it's against the protocol and stuff, even though literally a couple of years ago, during when the BCH and BSV split, that was what he suggested as a tactic and said we should mine these empty blocks, we should do this, it's perfectly valid, blah blah blah. And so of course once people come out with those screenshots, it's like like you said, it's a circle that comes back around to just completely mind fucking yourself into the opposite of reality.
Yeah.
But it's getting so ridiculous at this point that there's very few people left at all. And like you said, discontent has started up in the ecosystem, which to me shows that the money must be starting to run out, because you can fund a lot of people to swallow a lot of bullshit as long as they're all getting paid. They're happy to look the other way. But at a certain point, the tech is just broken enough and the money stops flowing, and then once it does, the rumblings start, and then the rumblings, if they're not quickly dealt with more resources or whatever clearly is not available, then it escalates from there until suddenly it all falls in a heap. So yeah, I do think it's on that trajectory.
Yeah, and I would even say that I don't think that Craig Wright is a good scammer. I mean, he's done a lot of stuff pretty well in the scamming department, but there is none of this like back and forth, like teasing the supporters on. It just seems like he's just trying to, like, for lack of a better term, just like screw them as hard as he can, as quickly as he can, over and over. And they're very resistant to like waking up to that, but they are. Everyone breaks eventually. But the right way of doing things in a, I mean, it's getting to be a little bit of a dark part of the podcast, but in an abusive relationship, you always like bring them back with like the good part of like, oh, I missed you so much, or like, oh, this guy, or like, oh, I'm sorry, I'll do better. Oh, I'll do better. See, and then you like, you hope, then you screw them again, and just like you, and eventually, it's not just like a 2-3 year thing, and then they have enough and they're scarred. It's like a 15-20 year thing, and then you string them along for all that, and it still ends. But then it just like, oof, then it's just like really rough at that point. So I think that Craig could do well to pull back a little bit and just like build back up, like the, hey, look, we're all in it together, and everyone's like, oh, I don't like Craig as much anymore, but we can still, and then before going back on his bullshit. The problem is I think his entire strategy was like, let's just win these lawsuits and then get shit because of that, and he didn't win the lawsuits, so I don't know. Exactly. He probably has enough money though to like never care.
Well, that's the thing. He individually might or might not. Who knows? It all seems like such a rickety shell game. And one of the things that's obvious to me is, just the Bitcoin SV is slowly bleeding away at the edges. But the central people, they can't cope. They can cope. That's what they're doing after these lawsuits. There's so much built up about every lawsuit. Like, we're going to get the lawsuit, we're going to get vindicated, it's all going to come out in court, and then that'll show them, and then the lawsuits will prove that we're the real Bitcoin, or Craig is Satoshi, or whatever. But every time he just comes up with false evidence, and that gets called out. And so now the latest thing is, well, Craig was being bullied and we're just allowing online bullying. It's like, no, it was a defamation case. It wasn't a harassment case, and it wasn't anything to do with anybody's feelings being hurt. If it's about defaming you, which means if you're telling the truth or substantially close to the truth or your opinion, then it's allowed, because that's free speech, and that's where things have degenerated to, basically.
Yeah, and I don't even really believe too much in defamation cases. I'm sure there's a lot of nuance. They go too far anyway. But that kind of brings me to the point of, I think we all should be very charitable and kind to our BSV friends, because a lot of them are going to be shaken out at some point. And it's really rough going. Like, you think it's rough looking at the shit show from the outside? Imagine the inside. All these PTSD victims. And honestly, like, some of them are saying really stupid things right now. And while I do think you should hold people accountable for their actions and their words, I just like, I'm okay with letting a lot of that stuff slide, like forgiving a lot of this stuff. Like, dude, you were in a cult. Like, it came down. I understand. Like, it wasn't cool, all the nonsense he said, but I understand. I'm going to be forgiving. And maybe I'm mostly just thinking about my friend Kurt because he's a great dude and he's saying some stuff that I don't know. There's no surprise to him. I'm publicly disagreeing with him on a lot of this stuff. So I cover my own ass to be like, look, I was a good friend and I told you I think this is wrong and stuff. But he's a great dude. He's going to hopefully come around eventually. But if not, it's whatever. Just it's kind of a shame that so many good people got kind of caught up in that. And honestly, good people leave good projects and go elsewhere and whatever. That's not a big of a thing. Like, oh, Bitcoin Cash people who went over to eCash. I mean, they're kind of maybe wasting their lives a little bit over there, but they're just wasting their lives. Like they're just working on something and hopefully getting paid that it may not last. Okay, fine. You went off to Ethereum. Oh, what if they turn out centralized and shitcoin, all this stuff? And then like, who cares? But when you go into this like weird cult thing, that's when it becomes a little bit sadder. That's not just, oh yeah, I knew him from this project. He went on to the other project. It's like, no, that's a little sad.
Well, it's just the whole thing ramped up to 11 because in Bitcoin, the original Bitcoin before any forks, there was a sense, and there still is to a large extent in all forks of Bitcoin, you need to have a pretty tough skin in terms of like, no, we are the minority, but we are actually right. Like, fuck everyone else. We are actually right, and we're not going to bend on that. It's like any countercultural movement or any uprising of any sort, it has to have an element of that. But if you're in the extreme end where you just double down, like the more that people tell you you're wrong or the more negative social feedback you get, if that constantly just perpetuates you into, no, that means we're even more right that they don't believe us. If you can't separate the sort of the generic doubt from specific negative feedback from your like friends and family or people you trust or anything, like this is getting way out of hand, then you just end up in that shrinking core of true believers until the death in quotation marks at the end, where it's just everybody who's left is kind of blinking and back in the sunlight like, oh man, I have made a huge mistake, like that meme. And just like, oh shit, I was actually wrong the whole time. Like,
yeah, but that's the thing, is like the wrongness realization comes in stages. And sometimes the stages sometimes they never end. Sometimes there's always going to be that nostalgia about the real Bitcoin and back then. But it's okay. Okay. Well, now that we hit this downer, let's talk about more positive news, which is OFAC and censorship. Such a cheery podcast today, isn't it? I mean, the good thing we're going to wrap it up on a good note. But 52% of blocks post-merge have been compliant with OFAC censorship. So, first off, your thoughts on all this stuff?
Well, this is worth clarifying, on Ethereum, right? So
yes,
it's kind of come in it's a part of a bigger narrative, right? It's come in the wake of the whole merge, which has been the big battle between the BTC and ETH people, where obviously your centralized comes into there a lot. Proof of stake versus proof of work, which one is better, comes into it. The flippening and price hype comes into it, and they're just at loggerheads, right? So, of course, immediately after the merge, the BTC people were going to be keeping a hawk eye on absolutely everything, because anything that they could bring up to be like, haha, we knew it, you guys have signed your own death warrant, they would immediately find and trumpet very loudly, which is what they've done. In this case, I actually agree with them. I think that, yes, it was a bit of a stupid move, and Ethereum has kind of signed a pact that it will have a tough time getting itself out of. Things do get right into the details of whether or not things are actually censored. You have people in Ethereum saying things like, oh, well, but if 51% are censored, then you just have to wait 24 seconds instead of 12 seconds because the next block won't be a censored one, and this kind of stuff. But to me, it's just cope layered on cope. Or they come back with another one, which is, well, this can and has happened on Bitcoin, which is true. There was Marathon mining pool, and they started mining OFAC-compliant blocks. The difference was that the BTC community went absolutely ballistic, and within a month or two, they stopped. and it hasn't restarted again. Not to say that it couldn't, but there was a clear pushback and it regressed. But in Ethereum, because everyone's like, nah, actually it's fine. The kind of point is, well, you're the frog in the boiling water, and yeah, when Bitcoin went through this test, they passed, and you're going through this test, and you're saying, oh, it's not a big deal. So that's kind of already the sign that you've lost.
I guess we'll see where it ends up because, so basically, OFAC has a bunch of censored things, a bunch of censored addresses and stuff. And validators that comply with this basically do not process blocks that have these transactions. Right now it's the majority, a slight majority, but they can just get into any other block and they get processed just half as fast, I guess, because of like the timing difference. So right now it's not a huge deal. As far as this as a immediate structural problem to Ethereum, I don't think it's a big deal at all. But as far as like the camel's nose under the tent, this kind of stuff can't be tolerated because at some point this isn't going to be like a whoopsie little. At some point it's going to be the government's going to be arresting people that run validators that don't do this, and at that point, you already want it to be you already want to have a group of people against this sort of thing, so that there's enough resistance so that you have like the 10% then. It's kind of interesting, the details of all this, because most people, there's this MEV minor something or other value nonsense. And I think the biggest problem with Ethereum is it's so damn complicated and convoluted and Rube Goldberg machine that like no one really gets what's going on. And so just whoever does get what's going on just gets to kind of dictate how things go, sort of Lightning Network style. But what we have here is basically transaction ordering is important for DeFi because a miner can front run a DeFi transaction. And so basically there's this system that validators have on top that does this. And this one thing is a centralized system called Flashbots, I believe, is just this one little system that does this MEV system that kind of makes stuff, that orders the blocks and makes stuff work. And it just as a default setting. So it's basically default. Everyone uses Flashbots in the US. Default, it filters this kind of stuff. Most of this is not even like intentional sense. It's just accidental censorship almost. Like people are, I don't know, I didn't know I was doing that. And now with the like outcries and stuff, and by the way, as I put on the screen, Justin Bond's tweet, Justin_Bonds, follow him. He has some great tweet threads. Goes into a lot of detail on that. Comes off a little ETH maxi, but it's good as far as the details of this stuff. Basically, there's a few technical changes that should probably be fixed in order to stop this kind of thing from happening by default. But after that, people need to absolutely start like resisting this kind of stuff. And it's not a technical, I don't think the 52% or whatever it is, it's probably less now, honestly, because I think Flashbots itself was going to stop putting in like the censorship or something like that. I forget, I didn't keep up with the details enough. But I honestly think that this kind of thing, it's not going to be that big of a problem. The problem of it is not the technical level, really. The problem is at the by default / complacency level, if you know what I mean. That it's not that, oh look, Ethereum is structurally built and proof of stake is structurally built to where it's like super easy to censor. No, not at all. It's just that the way the ecosystem is run, like someone runs this thing, someone runs that thing, everyone does it by default, everything by default, just the Occam's razor, like the easiest possible thing, is just accidentally slips in some like censorship. That's kind of where we're at.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think, and it's funny because the Ethereum community are some of the biggest proponents of this idea of layer zero and the community can do slashing and blah, 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 blah. But when it comes down to it, at least in my opinion, a lot of the time the Ethereum community is a bit weak sauce and they're trying to be too happy-go-lucky and whatever. I mean, as much as I disagree with the BTC maxis or even with any other hardcore community, maybe even BSV or Monero or Bitcoin Cash, the point of the at the sharp end, the point is that people are going to hold on their principles basically. and not just be kind of wishy-washy. And you don't need everybody to be rabidly in favor of that. Obviously, you want to have a big tent, but if you don't have a good enough core of those people, then it just gets chipped away at the edges. And that's kind of what seems to be happening to Ethereum little by little. And it's one of those scenarios where once you've fallen off the cliff, once you've gone too far, once you're past the point of no return, it's too late to walk it back. It's already over. And so that's why I think the Ethereum community thinks other coins are maybe paranoid or over exaggerating or whatever. But it's like, well, we're just trying to warn you, but as you inch closer to the line, or as you may already be over it, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's definitely because Ethereum's so inclusive and is more left-leaning people, more tech nerds, more that kind of artists and stuff are all involved. It becomes less. There's just less antisocial bastards like we all are in crypto. Like it's the more normie side of things, despite being super technically complicated at the same time. So we just kind of end up with that. We're running up on the last couple stories. So first, everyone watching, please hit the like button. There's 9 of you watching, 6 likes. We did a little bit more. And also, if you want to leave any super chats or anything, get that in now or start thinking about what you're going to say now so we can address those and you're not left out high and dry. The next podcast, next week we're like, oh, we have all these irrelevant questions from last week to answer before we get the show going. So just want to remind you guys of that. Now let's get to another happy, positive development for crypto around the world. Oh no. 77.1 of Salvadorans surveyed think the government should stop spending public money on Bitcoin. Less than 40% of surveyed respondents said they supported the approval of Bitcoin as legal tender in a recent study published by a Central American University in El Salvador. So, what do you know? They're not into it. What gives? What happened?
Well, they tried to force it on everyone. It's the same as the Ethereum story. It's just the Bitcoin version, which is that the things that you seed into the core of your community bubble up through reality, and they come out the end as a bit of a disaster. And in Bitcoin BTC, it's store of value, man. You don't need to be able to spend it. Like Lightning Network will fix this, and we love the fact that everybody's just getting in our coin to gamble or speculate / store their value. And, given the ebbs and flows of time, that's what's happening in El Salvador. You've got the president who got advised by a bunch of people about laser eye hype. He doesn't have laser eyes anymore. He's taken that off. So the faith is beginning to waver there. And he just piled a bunch of dosh for his country into Bitcoin BTC and then mandated it on the entire population to try and pump his bags at the height of the mania. That obviously fell apart as the reality of being a underdeveloped country with poor internet access and the problems with implementation and a community unskilled in actually rolling out merchant adoption all came to a big supernova of problems. And here we are a year later that the price has crashed off, so that speculation wasn't looking good, and the groundswell of adoption and critical mass didn't happen at all. And maybe they'll turn it around, but maybe the price will go up and that will revive some of the treasury finances, if nothing else. But I can't blame the average El Salvadoran for being very negative on the whole Bitcoin thing as a rule.
Of course. Yeah, it's kind of, it makes me sad to a certain extent. I'm still on the fence a little bit about what the whole impact of this thing will be. It seems like one thing is very clear, which is that a foreign investment in tourism has gone significantly up in El Salvador. This has been a great publicity stunt for that. That seems to be pretty clear. The thing is, the other stuff that circles around the whole thing, which is the merchant mandate, which, I'm sure inconvenienced a bunch of merchants, but it's probably not that bad. But it's we got to design and pay for this stupid app that everyone's got to use. We got to build all these ATMs and then, coordinate a cash out of this. And we got to all that infrastructure and stuff. And then all the buying of it the actual buying of Bitcoin and the timing of it and just other things. It just makes it it's kind of a little bit of a disastrous situation. And this is why I think it's very important, just like these decentralization principles. I think it's very important to have principles because they are a general compass / roadmap for evaluating if things are good or bad if you don't have perfect knowledge of the situation. And the problem is people thought, oh, we like Bitcoin. This guy's a Bitcoiner. He's our guy. He's going to make Bitcoin happen in the country. Therefore good, which is an easy trap to fall into. And very smart people fall into this trap. I'm not talking shit about all the Bitcoiners here, although I easily could. It's a very easy trap to fall into is that whole, like he's our guy, he's implementing Bitcoin, we like Bitcoin, it's all great, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. But on the other hand, like we realize that this is government, specifically government is central planning an economy. Where has that gone well? Like just sit in that for a second. Where has central planning of an entire country's economy ever gone well? What was that old like Ronald Reagan quote about like, you know, if the government was in charge of the desert, there'd be a sand shortage within a few months? It's like, it's the same thing. Like over the years, investing in Bitcoin specifically, I guess, has been one of the safer options of just like making money. As long as you like don't sell or whatever below your whatever buying rate. As long as you dollar cost average on the way up. It's like, yet I do think that government of especially El Salvador, but any government, but especially a developing country with a quasi dictator with a sash, any one of the sash countries, where the president wears his like Miss America pageant bullshit. I especially trust that guy can lose money on the greatest investment opportunity of our lifetimes, don't you think?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, he hasn't sold them. Like there's still a way that it works out if he just I mean, nobody knows whether he has. He says he hasn't sold them. He definitely could have dumped off half his share and nobody would know the difference. He could just be lying. But I think maybe he isn't, and he does still have his Bitcoins, and he can just afford to wait it out, and that's fine. Maybe if he waits long enough, things will go up. I mean, Bitcoin is likely to recover in price to some extent, or maybe get back to an all-time high after another halving, or once the hype cycle comes back around, maybe the dollar will be inflated to shit at that point, or maybe the damage has already been done in terms of PR. But it could still get out. But the problem is that once the price goes up, that will be the time when maybe he should consider getting out, but it'll be the exact moment when it's the opposite, and he's probably going to double down and buy another huge chunk of it when it's at all-time highs. So yeah,
I mean, I hate to be anticlimactic and all this. I do think that this is going to turn out as like a big middle of the road thing, where it's like, oh yeah, technically, like you have the mandate of like, you have to take it if you're technologically capable, but it basically only like the big tourist spots will take it, where there's going to be a no offense, but like a stupid white person complaining, I can't spend my Bitcoin here, and then okay, whatever. And then every merchant will basically just never take it as payment for a little while and just be like, yeah, that was big a few years ago. And then the government is going to probably hold on to their Bitcoin, and every once in a while when they get broke, they'll sell some. When Bukele is gone, which he's not going to be there forever. I mean, hopefully not.
Well, he just hasn't he been just getting himself set up for like another term, which is past his term limits. Yeah, exactly. Like, the rules were you're allowed for this many terms, and now he's lining himself up to be in another term. But it's all good apparently.
But the thing is, what people don't understand, what despots don't understand, is that the people can always like shoot you in the back of the head, which does happen a lot in some of those parts of the world, right? So who knows how long he's going to be around or whatever. I don't know if he's going to be buying all the time, but I think it's just going to kind of like sort of fizzle out over time, and then there will be a bunch of companies that still exist in El Salvador because they got lured there by the promise of a crypto paradise. And if the laws remain favorable, companies will always be there doing their thing. But then just kind of the tourism bump goes away, the investment bump goes away when you realize there's real problems with the country, and it'll just like, was it better off for it? Maybe, maybe not. Who knows? Who cares? Back to normal. Like, that's just the way the world works. It's just going to be, all right, back to normal, instead of like, this is the best thing ever and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, we got a super chat from Onetime. Hi, Onetime. He says, a centralized cryptocurrency that needs to be compliant to regulation, political manipulation, and censorship is BS. Cryptocurrency is only cool if it's decentralized enough to be independent from outside manipulation, reliably indestructible, and incorruptible. Yes, and I should point out in everything I'd say after this that those are ideals. Ideals are not always fully reached, but they should always be striven towards. So, yes, I completely agree Onetime. And that's a thing that I've noticed, by the way, with the Ethereum kind of started with Ethereum, where before Ethereum, I think every crypto project pretended to not be a shitcoin. They pretended to be like, oh, we're in the Bitcoin ideals of super decentralization, all this cool stuff. And then Ethereum was like, well, we'll do that, but we'll do other things too. And we're still all about being sound on the base layer, and everyone can run a node and weird nonsense like that. But we're going to like make some compromises here and there to do cool stuff, but we're still mostly cypherpunk. But then most of the crypto thing wanted to compete with Ethereum, not on the, well, mostly cypherpunk, but cool stuff. They just want to do the cool stuff. And so then you have like Solana. Solana is the ultimate, terrible thing that's kind of like the result of that. And I do think that there is going to be a hipster era for crypto when you have a new wave of projects that kind of start, that just start there and that like start with like sound fundamentals, or people are going to care about pre-mines and things like that, which they don't today. Today, 0% of people care about pre-mines unless people who are just already in cryptos that they like the old school ones. So I think that there's going to be a hipster renaissance of like core values on cryptos. And it's kind of funny. I was chatting with Justin Bonds yesterday. I'm going to put that one out on Monday, hopefully, about like the proof of work versus proof of stake. And one thing he admitted, again, spoiler, but still watch the episode because it'll be good, is he kind of agrees that proof of stake, starting as a proof of stake project, gives a highly centralized supply in the beginning, and it's probably smarter to start as a proof of work and then transfer over time to where you get the coins kicked out everywhere and distributed, and then it's kind of better. And so I think at some point, even proof of stake projects, if they're meant to be serious, if they're not meant to be like a Polygon, like a side chain or a L2 off of one of the things that you kind of don't care if it's a little weird and centralized. Like if you're trying to build something solid from the ground up, you're going to do like a Zcash type thing where it's like you start with a proof of work and then eventually go to proof of stake at some point, or even if you might never go to proof of stake, maybe proof of work is going to be here forever. But however that ends up, I think that we're going to see like a first principles renaissance, probably not this bull market, this coming bull market, but the next one. That would be my general prediction of like timeline. I don't know if you think that's reasonable.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the timeline. I think that things are going to come back to the basics. I agree that's going to happen, but I don't think it's going to be a bunch of new projects launching that are like, no, we are the cool ones. I think it's actually the opposite. I think newer projects will start dying off. There's only so many people who can be sold on blockchain, crypto, it's new, get involved, here's $1 million, blah, blah, blah. And we've kind of been through that. We had the ICOs, now we've had NFTs. It's going to get harder and harder to just sell people on like hype by just mixing the word blockchain in there. And so I think what's going to happen is those smaller, like the ultimate value of decentralization is that it's resilient across time. And so as time ticks on, those other things, it's one way or another, the world's going to find a way that their incentive structure is imbalanced or whatever. Those projects are going to blow up and die or go away or just fade off or lose traction or whatever it is, lose hype. And people will think back to like, wait a second, what are we actually doing here in crypto? And the OG coins, like obviously I like Bitcoin Cash, but also Monero, maybe Dash to a certain extent, even Ethereum, Bitcoin BTC, they'll get a new lease of life because people who got introduced to crypto with a lot of crap will start to understand, oh, wait a second, there's a reason that these coins that I didn't initially like because I thought they weren't the flashiest, newest thing. Like, there's a reason they're still around and they're still kicking, and maybe I need to understand more of the foundations, right, rather than being at the surface level.
Yeah, because I think that just seeing the privacy level, for example, on like a lot of these NFT platforms and stuff, just how horrendous it is. But the fact that no one cares shows me that once you have a lot of people, which coming a cycle, you're getting a lot of people, then you're going to start seeing the exploits and problems. And then the cycle after that, people are going to be like, let's go back. Like, what was it written in the beginning here? And then people are going to be like, look what I found. This is the Bitcoin white paper. I thought this was like, you know, some like Craig Wright smut fan fiction or something.
Yeah, there will be that. You're right. There's gonna
come back
be like a whole bunch of people that come in and are like, guys, fuck, I just read the Bitcoin white paper. Like, I've been in crypto for 5 years, and let me tell you, like, this is the cutting edge. This is the new Satoshi. Have you heard of this guy? And it's gonna be like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Has anyone found out who he is? And it's like, he might be Australian. Fulagi Johnson just commented in live chat, like, my weekly staple. Oh, thank you very much. All right, let's talk about the fun part. Can we skip to the good part? Oh, no one else hear me do that. Bitcoin Cash 2022, St. Kitts, November 12th through 13th. There's just like 4 hours, whatever. That's no longer relevant. But basically, there's a conference, Bitcoin Cash 2022, in St. Kitts and Nevis. November 12th through 13th, and it's supposed to be the 100% Bitcoin Cash adoption experience. And so, from what I've heard, and I haven't been super in the weeds on this, but there's a gentleman called Sunny, who is he's a sunny fellow, except to people like Mark Falzon, but who basically has put a lot of resources and influence towards getting as many businesses in his country as possible to accept crypto, but specifically Bitcoin Cash, from my understanding. And so the idea, which, by the way, I'm not saying that I should say this not to sort of downplay how cool this is, but to reprimand everyone who's done worse things, is this should be what every crypto conference does, is you should have no fiat, no credit card, only crypto. In this case, BCH. That should be the thing. I mean, come on, like, we're how many years into this thing? You should be able to figure that out by now. But so, yeah, that'll be a fun time. I am regrettably not able to go because it is right during a very difficult period from, like, the holidays. I got a lot of work on my house. I don't even have floors in my house or a kitchen set up. So, like, I got to fix all that stuff. And then, so it's right during the time when it's just not a good time to kind of do that. But I hope everyone who can goes, and I hope everyone critically, and not critically meaning like with criticism, but as in like critical thinking, documents the experience, especially the claims of, oh, I can spend it everywhere, and just kind of give I want a good like picture of what the actual adoption's like there. And I want hopefully someone like Mark Falzon, but maybe it'll have to be someone else, go around and like talk to merchants and just say, hey, so like, how often do you get payments here? What do you do with it? Do you convert? Like, just kind of get a sense for like a real adoption situation here. So anyway, I don't know. Are you going?
Yeah, I'm going. Fuck yeah, I'm going. So that's why I'm fired up about it. And I'm going to do exactly that. I'm going to land and see what's going on. Is it all hype and vaporware? I got to see it for myself. Or is it actually kicking off? And I'm very hopeful, because there seems to be on semi-reliable, sources, that it is, maybe it's not everywhere, or it's not, totally taken over, but it's going to be hopefully enough that we can at least make it work with just Bitcoin Cash. And certainly having the Bitcoin Cash conference there and a bunch of people like fly in and come to be involved specifically. Yeah, like, we'll be doing a recording. Like, I think a lot of the talks and stuff are going to be recorded, and I'm going to try and run some live streams maybe after the event date, the days are over or whatever. Just people can kind of come on the live stream and talk about it, so that people who are not present obviously can see what's actually going on, and then make maybe some highlight videos or clips of like, here's what we found on the island, that kind of stuff. So I'm so fired up. It's going to be unreal, because it's a huge moment for the Bitcoin Cash community, because the last major conference was in 2019. So it's been 3 years now, and just getting all the people who are serious in the same place chatting to each other is going to just produce so many cool collaborations and projects, and so much motivation and energy for the whole scene, which is maybe not going to play out instantly. I hope it will. I hope some stuff from the conference comes out that's just awesome and, you know, gets a bit of viral attention. But I think really it's going to be the payoff, that because the year after, if it all goes well, and the Catitians, the locals can see, like, wait a second, we got all this tourism, and we got like all that criticism that we were handing out to El Salvador. In my mind, should be how it's done right. And so we've got to kind of prove that there's another way to do it, and a better and a more successful way. And if we can do that, it's going to be massive. So yeah, I'm super excited.
Yeah, I mean, same. I think it's going to be pretty cool. My only regret, other than that I can't go, because that would be fun to go, is it's maybe a year or two early, but that doesn't mean you can't repeat it. It's just that, like, I hate to say it, but there's the year before, like the before and after the bull market peaks, would you just get everyone out of the woodwork? And I have a feeling, because this is such a which, by the way, last week I covered a story where the crypto industry, as far as hiring and firing and stuff, is much less cycle dependent than ever, which is fantastic, because I just wanted this to be all the time. I don't want it to be like, and then you just like go into hibernation. Yeah, hibernation. So unfortunately, there is a reality of like the cycles, but I do think that it could be if there's a good showing in the bear market, unless like BCH gets torpedoed because Roger Ver calls it a scam and becomes a Monero maximalist or whatever in the afterwards, something crazy like that happens. I think that then it could be when you have it like a year or two later, then it's just like, oh my gosh, this is great. This is, all this kind of stuff. Bitcoin was meant to be spent as used as money, and you can use it in Bitcoin Cash and all the merchants and St. Kitts and, et cetera, et cetera. Right off in the promised land.
And you got to do that. You got to do that groundwork early. That's exactly what it is. It's just the ant and the grasshopper. Like, the way that there will be just a killer conference next year or 2 years later, or I can just see it happening. I don't know. Maybe it's just my hopium. Obviously, it's motivated reasoning, blah, blah, blah. But this is actually what it is. If you told me 9 years ago, like, this is what should have been being done 9 years ago, I don't know why nobody was doing it. I guess there's too much other stuff going on, right? But it just needed to be like a small place where we're just going to concentrate the resources of the community, get some local adoption, start hosting crypto-only conferences there, and then let people come and see for themselves. Like, fuck, it's working. And then go from there, right? And then maybe expand to the next island, or work on the next thing, or whatever, solve real problems for real people, and concentrate the network effect into one area. Yeah, go from there.
This one might also, as maybe a philosophical point, this might be one of the last times this kind of thing has the allure, though, because I don't know if you noticed, but like, so most crypto conferences, you could maybe buy your tickets in crypto, but that's it. And then you have you have Bukele making the El Salvador law stuff. So then you can have Bitcoin conferences there and be like, look, you could use it actually. Whoa, hype, buy my coin, all that kind of nonsense. Then you have Sunny, the friendlier Bukele in this case, although that sounds like a huge insult, so please don't take it like that. But like the same thing of like Sunny and a bunch of other people also recreating this experience so that you could go to a conference, actually use it around, and then get all hyped and go back home. Hopefully, maybe not next year, but like in a few years, this won't have its same allure anymore, because everyone's going to be able to just like, oh, look, I spent it here, but I always spend it, kind of thing. I can always spend it anywhere. And then it's always going to be cool to go to a conference, because then you get to see the new stuff, the cool stuff, like the cutting edge, the whatever. and meet with all the awesome people. But this might be like one of the few where you get people like excited to spend crypto finally.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's going to be interesting to see. Yeah, the locals is going to play a huge part of it, because St. Kitts is not that big of a place. I think it's only like 50 or 60,000 people, if I remember right. Mm-hmm. So if you get in like 50 or 100 people who are super hype about Bitcoin Cash, that's a good chunk of people for a population that size. And if they're all coming in, obviously, with money and willingness to spend Bitcoin Cash, and they do that, then by 2 degrees of separation, there's going to be a lot of merchants who are like, damn, I did like 10 sales in Bitcoin Cash today. And they're going to be talking to their girlfriend and their kid and their cousin or whatever. And just the people on the island are going to be hearing that from multiple sort of sources and being like, wait, this is actually kicking off. What is going on here? And I mean, the local politicians have already been sort of involved, because they had the hearings on St. Martin a few months back, which is a neighboring island, but a similar thing was happening there with some good adoption work. And the politicians who were against the sort of crypto, legalization or discussions or whatever they were having were sort of scoring a bit of an own goal, because they were panicking about, but I'm seeing this everywhere. And it's like, yes, exactly. They couldn't afford to ignore it. Yeah. And that's hopefully that momentum starts to get going, because once it is going there, then it can start spreading onto other places. So this is how we conquer the world, one step at a time, just getting a small group of people who are like actually on a crypto economy and actually using it, and building real prosperity and freedom for themselves.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way it's got to go. All right, so before we wrap it up, I'm sure there's a little bit of part of this. So usually this is the point where I gift you the NFT for being on the thing if you haven't had it yet. But you do have it, and you've been using it, and so that's all great. But I should let you guys know, there's a link in the description where you can buy your own NFT to support the channel, and also get access to that super cool super chat that Onetime used. And yes, I do post a lot of stuff in that Discord. It's still in the rough early stages, though, because I will probably be issuing a lot of these on Polygon instead of Wax, because of the onboarding experience in the future. And I'm going to have like a site that actually lets you do all this stuff a lot easier than the current, like using the DEX and all that kind of stuff. And I might even set up a Telegram channel for those who like that. So just so you know, you can all do that. That's all cool stuff. And then if you come on the show, you get one of these shiny ones, which does about the same thing, but this is the one you can't buy unless one of these ungrateful bastards who I give it to decides to resell it. But yeah, it does kind of the same thing. So proof of work, all that good stuff. Any parting thoughts before you shill everything that you got as far as your podcast, your Twitter, your everything?
Just pay attention to this Bitcoin Cash island stuff in St. Kitts. If you are interested in Dash or Monero or just digital cash, I guess, anything like that, in my mind, this is where the action is. I'm going to go there and make some coverage of it. But if you haven't looked into it, there are already videos that people have done, right? Mark Falzon, like you said, has done some. Ryan Giffen has done some. Sonny has done some, although, he's more involved, so might be a bit more sort of biased in terms of his take on it. But I think everybody who's genuinely interested in actually a separate crypto economy and transacting in crypto rather than just speculating on the FTX block-listed exchange should be like, wait, this is actually industry-leading stuff here. And for anybody who isn't that convinced about Bitcoin Cash, just take a look at that and maybe it'll change your mind.
Yeah, that's a great way to wrap up. So people could fly at the Bitcoin Cash Podcast, or is it the BCH Podcast?
The BCH Podcast. That's too long. Bitcoin Cash Podcast. The Twitter was like, you could. That's that handle's
at
not allowed.
The BCH Podcast on Twitter, and then you have a podcast of your own. It's just the Bitcoin Podcast, Bitcoin Cash Podcast on YouTube, I assume.
Yeah. Everywhere you can just look it up, the Bitcoin Cash Podcast, and you should find it on Spotify and YouTube on, I don't know, whatever you're on. It's basically Tune In and like Stitcher. It's on all of them.
All the fun stuff. It's funny because my friend Ken Bozak has a show, or he had, I don't know, not super consistent, called Not Another Bitcoin Podcast, which I thought was a great name. And at some point, maybe as a troll, I'm going to have to start Not Another Bitcoin Cash Podcast. And
Do it.
And just copy your material mostly, but like just a couple of tweaks to avoid plagiarism. And then,
I'm not going to sue you, bro. Don't worry. Just get the message out there. Anyway, you
down
can
with
do
the
it.
Craigan's way, huh?
Maybe, maybe as a troll, maybe I'd write like a troll cease and desist letter and send it to you, being like, Joel, this is to notify you that you're in breach of the blockchain guidelines, blah blah blah, and I'm Satoshi and you've stolen my invention.
That would be fun. I'm sure that there's I wonder how many Craig Wright Halloween costumes there's going to be. It's probably just way too.
Hopefully none.
Yeah. Maybe a Hodlonaut. Maybe there'll be some of them's. You know, probably a
cat with the space helmet. Like it's kind of a good.
Yeah, it's good, easy to replicate
type thing. Yeah.
Or if you want to be real, just show up as a sweaty middle-aged man, and then that's kind of what it really is. But it's a different story. All right.
Yeah.
This banter could end up going forever. We got to wrap it up. Bye-bye, guys. I'll see you guys next week. It's going to be a good one, of course. It always is. And yeah, thanks very much, Jeremy, for being on. Please follow him on Twitter. If you're still here, hit the like button. Oh, I got another like. That's nice. And subscribe, because there's a lot of you new people here who don't subscribe, and you're jerks for doing it. So do it. And watch the Bitcoin Cash podcast. And yeah, I'll see you guys around.